Billionaire boarded a plane to escape his past and found a child with his same eyes sitting next to him. Before we begin, drop a comment telling us which city you're watching from, and once the story ends, don't forget to rate it from 0 to 10. Oh, and make sure to follow our channel for more stories like this. Now, sit back and enjoy every detail. Beckett Langston stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of his Manhattan penthouse, watching the city pulse below him like a living organism. 37 years old, worth more than most small countries, and completely hollow inside. The headlines from this morning's Wall Street Journal still burned in his memory. Cybersecurity mogul's personal data leaked, irony at its finest. They had published photos of his empty refrigerator, his unmade bed, screenshots of dating app conversations he'd never had the courage to finish. The press had turned his loneliness into entertainment, and somehow, that felt like the final insult. His phone buzzed against the marble countertop. Another interview request. Another opportunity to explain himself to strangers while the one person who mattered had stopped listening 6 years ago. Callie. The name still hit him like a physical blow. Callie Hart, with her messy auburn hair and fierce green eyes, who had looked at him like he was just a man, not a fortune. She had loved his quiet Sunday mornings and hated his gilded cage. When she'd asked him to choose between his empire and their future, he'd chosen wrong. And when she left, she'd taken the only version of himself he'd ever liked. Beckett grabbed his leather jacket, not the $1,000 one his stylist had picked, but the worn one Callie had bought him at a thrift store in Brooklyn. "It makes you look human," she'd said, laughing as she fixed his collar. 40 minutes later, he was at LaGuardia, standing in line like any other passenger. No private jet today. No assistant clearing his path. Just him and a commercial flight to Portland. Far enough to breathe, anonymous enough to disappear. The gate was crowded with the usual mix of business travelers and families. A little girl with pigtails was crying because she'd dropped her stuffed elephant. Her mother knelt down, whispering comfort while fixing the toy's tiny sweater. Beckett looked away. Happy families were like looking directly at the sun. Beautiful, but blinding. "Now boarding all passengers," the gate agent announced. Beckett found his seat, 12A window. He'd specifically requested it, wanting to watch the ground disappear beneath him. Maybe if he got high enough, the weight in his chest would ease. He was settling into his seat when the flight attendant approached, guiding a small boy down the aisle. The child wore a blue airline badge that read, "Unaccompanied Minor," and clutched a worn backpack against his chest. "Here we go, sweetheart," the attendant said gently. "Seat 12B, right next to this nice gentleman." Beckett looked up to smile politely at his seatmate and felt the world tilt sideways. The boy had dark, unruly hair and was maybe 5 years old, but it was his eyes that made Beckett's breath catch in his throat. Pale gray like storm clouds with tiny flecks of silver. The same eyes that looked back at him every morning from his bathroom mirror. "Hi," the boy said shyly, climbing into his seat with the careful precision of someone who'd been coached on airplane behavior. "I'm Eli." Beckett's hands were shaking. He gripped his armrest and managed. "I'm Beckett. Nice to meet you, Eli." "That's a funny name," Eli said, buckling his seatbelt with impressive focus. "My mom says there are all kinds of names in the world, and they all mean something special." "Your mom? What does your name mean?" Beckett asked, his voice rougher than intended. "It means my God answers," Eli recited proudly. Mom looked it up in a big book. She says names are like promises. The plane began to taxi and Eli pressed his face to the window between their seats. "I've never been on a plane before. Mom says it's like riding a cloud but louder." Beckett studied the boy's profile, looking for more similarities, more proof of what his gut already knew. There, the slight dimple in his left cheek when he concentrated, the way his left eyebrow raised slightly higher than his right when he was curious, and that nervous tick, the barely perceptible twitch at the corner of his left eye when he was excited. Beckett had had the same tick as a child. "Where are you flying to?" he asked carefully. "Portland, to visit my grandma Nora. She has a cat named Whiskers and she makes cookies that are shaped like moons." Eli's eyes lit up, and that little tick appeared, just as Beckett had expected. "Mom couldn't come because she has to work on her big story, but she promised to call me every night." The plane lifted off, and Eli grabbed Beckett's arm instinctively as they rose into the clouds. His small hand was warm and trusting, and Beckett felt something crack open inside his chest. "Are you scared?" Beckett asked gently. Eli shook his head, but his grip tightened. "Mom says brave people can still be a little scared." She says it's okay because being brave means doing important things even when your tummy feels funny. She always was wise beyond her years. Your mom sounds very smart. She is. Eli beamed. She writes stories about people who do bad things so everyone can know the truth. She says the truth is like sunshine. Sometimes it hurts your eyes, but it helps things grow. Beckett's heart clenched. That was pure Callie, turning journalism into poetry for a 5-year-old. Her name is Callie, Eli continued, digging in his backpack for a tablet. Callie Hart. She has hair like autumn leaves and she smells like vanilla coffee. The world stopped. Completely stopped. Callie Hart. His Callie. And this boy with his eyes, his mannerisms, his... What did you say your mom's name was? Beckett whispered. Callie Hart, Eli repeated, looking up from his tablet with those impossibly familiar gray eyes. Do you know her? But before Beckett could answer, before he could process what this meant, before he could figure out how to breathe again, Eli smiled. That same crooked, heartbreaking smile that Callie used to give him on quiet Sunday mornings. And in that moment, 30,000 feet above the ground, Beckett Langston realized he wasn't running from his past anymore. He was flying straight into his future. Some truths hit you like lightning. Sudden, blinding, and impossible to ignore. Beckett stared at Eli's innocent face, his mind racing through calculations he'd never wanted to make. 6 years since Callie left. Eli looked about 5. The math was simple, devastating, and undeniable. Do you know my mom? Eli asked again, tilting his head with curiosity that reminded Beckett painfully of Callie's investigative instincts. I might have met her once, Beckett managed, his voice barely above a whisper. His hands were trembling so badly he had to clasp them together. Eli's face brightened. Really? Most people don't know her yet, but she says someday everyone will because she writes really important stories. She showed me one about people who were taking money from sick kids. She made them give it back. Classic Callie. Always fighting for the underdog, always exposing the truth no matter how powerful the enemy. Beckett had fallen in love with that fierce integrity, then lost her because he'd been too afraid to live up to it. She sounds like a hero, Beckett said, and meant it. She is, but sometimes she gets really sad when she's writing. She thinks I don't notice, but I do. Eli lowered his voice like he was sharing a secret. She looks at her phone sometimes and gets this face like when you bite into something sour. Then she puts the phone away really fast. Beckett's throat tightened. Did she still have his number saved? Did she sometimes start to call him, then stop? The possibility felt like hope and torture at the same time. The flight attendant appeared with drinks and snacks. How are we doing here, gentlemen? Eli, are you comfortable? Yes, ma'am, Eli replied politely. Beckett's really nice. He knows my mom. The attendant smiled at Beckett. That's wonderful. It's always comforting when children have familiar faces around. She leaned closer to Beckett. He's been so well behaved. His mother clearly raised him right. His mother. The words echoed in Beckett's mind as the attendant moved on. He watched Eli carefully open his apple juice. The same methodical way Beckett approached everything. The boy caught him staring and offered a shy smile. Are you okay, Beckett? You look like my mom when she's thinking really hard about her stories. Just thinking, Beckett said. Eli, can I ask you something? Sure. Do you know your dad? Eli's expression grew thoughtful. Mom says he's far away and very busy with important work. She says maybe someday I'll meet him, but not to worry about it because we have everything we need. He paused, then added quietly, but sometimes I wonder what he looks like. Beckett felt like he was drowning. What do you wonder? If he has gray eyes like me? If he likes chocolate chip cookies? If he would want to play catch in the park? Eli shrugged with the casual acceptance of a child who'd learned not to ask too many questions about painful subjects. Mom always gets quiet when I ask too much, so I stopped asking. God, what have I done? I bet he would want to play catch with you, Beckett said hoarsely. Any dad would be lucky to have a son like you. Eli beamed at the compliment, but then his expression grew serious. Beckett, can you keep a secret? Of course. Sometimes I pretend that my dad is a superhero and that's why he can't be with us. Because he's saving the world and stuff. It makes Mom less sad when I tell her that story. Beckett's vision blurred. This child, his child, was protecting Callie's feelings at 5 years old, creating fantasies to ease her pain. The boy was more emotionally mature than Beckett had been at 31. That's a beautiful story, Eli. Do you think it could be true? That maybe some dads can't be with their kids because they're doing something really important? Beckett looked into those gray eyes. His eyes. and saw hope so pure it nearly broke him. "I think some dads make mistakes," he said carefully. "Really big mistakes, and sometimes they don't know how to fix them." "Oh," Eli considered this. "Well, my mom says everyone gets second chances if they're really, truly sorry, and if they try super hard to be better." The plane hit a patch of turbulence, and Eli instinctively reached for Beckett's hand. The contact was electric, this small, trusting grip that connected him to something he'd thought was lost forever. "I'm not scared," Eli said, but his fingers tightened around Beckett's. "I know you're not," Beckett replied. "You're very brave. Mom says I get that from her side of the family. She says heart women and their boys are tough as nails." Eli giggled. "But not scary tough, good tough, heart women and their boys." Callie had claimed him, had given him her name, had built a life where Beckett was just a memory she protected their son from. The captain's voice crackled over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're beginning our descent into Portland. Please return to your seats and prepare for landing." Eli looked out the window at the approaching city. "There's Grandma Nora. Well, not really, but she's down there somewhere. She's gonna make me her famous moon cookies and show me her photo albums. She has pictures of Mom when she was little." Beckett's pulse quickened. "Photo albums?" "Uh-huh. Grandma Nora has pictures of everyone. She says family history is important. She even has pictures of my mom's old friends from before I was born. Did she keep any pictures of me?" The plane touched down smoothly, and around them, passengers began gathering their belongings. Beckett felt panic rising in his throat. In minutes, Eli would walk away, and this impossible, life-changing encounter would be over. But as they waited for their turn to disembark, Eli looked up at him with those heartbreakingly familiar eyes and asked the question that would haunt Beckett for the rest of his life. "Beckett, do you think my dad thinks about me sometimes?" The hardest lies to live with are the ones we tell ourselves. "Every single day," Beckett whispered, the truth escaping before he could stop it. "I think he thinks about you every single day." Eli's eyes widened with wonder. "Really? How do you know?" Beckett's chest felt like it was caving in. How could he explain to this innocent child that his father was sitting right next to him, that the man he'd been wondering about was the same coward who'd been too afraid to answer a phone call 6 years ago? "Sometimes adults just know things," Beckett said weakly. The plane had stopped, and passengers were filing out around them. A flight attendant approached with a clipboard and a gentle smile. "Eli Hart? I'm Jennifer. I'll be escorting you to meet your grandmother." "Okay." Eli turned to Beckett, his face bright with newfound friendship. "Thank you for sitting with me, Beckett. You're really nice. I hope we see each other again sometime. If I have anything to say about it, we will." "Me too, buddy. Have fun with your grandma's moon cookies." Eli giggled and shouldered his little backpack. As Jennifer guided him toward the exit, he turned back and waved. "Bye, Beckett. Tell your family I said hi." Your family. If only he knew. Beckett watched them disappear into the jetway, then sat frozen in his seat as the plane emptied around him. A cleaning crew boarded, but he barely noticed them. His mind was spinning with impossible questions. What was he supposed to do now? Follow them? Introduce himself to Callie's mother? Demand answers he had no right to ask for? His phone buzzed. A text from his assistant. "The Portland meeting has been confirmed for tomorrow at 2 p.m. Hotel reservations are set." Portland meeting. He'd completely forgotten why he'd come here in the first place. Some cybersecurity consultation that had seemed important 48 hours ago. Now it felt like background noise to the symphony of chaos in his head. 20 minutes later, Beckett was walking through Portland International Airport in a daze. He moved through baggage claim mechanically, his eyes scanning the crowd for any sign of a small boy with gray eyes and his grandmother. And then he saw them. Eli was wrapped in the arms of a woman in her 70s with silver hair pulled back in a neat bun, and Callie's same bright green eyes. She was kneeling at his level, cupping his face in her hands like he was the most precious thing in the world. "My sweet boy," she was saying, her voice carrying that same warmth Beckett remembered from the few times he'd met her years ago. "Did you have a good flight? Were you brave?" "I was so brave, Grandma Nora. And I made a friend. His name is Beckett, and he knows Mom." Nora Hart straightened slowly, her eyes scanning the crowd with the sharp intelligence that ran in the family. For a heart-stopping moment, her gaze locked with Beckett's across the terminal. Recognition flashed across her features. Surprise, then something harder to read. Not anger exactly, but a wariness that cut through Beckett like a blade. She whispered something to Eli, who nodded eagerly and began chattering about airplane snacks. But Nora's eyes never left Beckett's face as she guided her grandson toward the exit. Beckett stood paralyzed, watching the woman who had raised the love of his life walk away with the child who might be his son. Every instinct screamed at him to follow, to explain, to demand answers. Instead, he pulled out his phone and did what he always did when life became too complex. He tried to control it. His fingers flew across the screen, pulling up every piece of public information he could find about Callie Hart, her freelance journalism website, her recent articles, her social media, which was sparse and professional, revealing nothing personal. But buried in a Google search, he found a local Portland newspaper piece from 2 years ago. Local journalist wins state award for investigative reporting. The photo showed Callie accepting a plaque, her hair longer than he remembered, her smile proud, but tired. And there, barely visible in the background, was a small hand reaching up toward her from outside the frame. Eli's hand. Beckett sank onto a hard airport bench, the weight of 6 years crashing down on him. How many birthdays had he missed? First steps? First words? How many nights had Callie rocked their son to sleep while Beckett had been building an empire he'd convinced himself mattered more than love? His phone rang. Unknown local number. "Hello?" He answered, his voice hoarse. "Mr. Langston." The voice was crisp, familiar, and carried the authority of someone who'd spent decades not suffering fools. "This is Nora Hart." Beckett's blood turned to ice. "Mrs. Hart, I saw you in the terminal. And I saw how you looked at my grandson." A pause. "We need to talk." "Yes," he said immediately. "Yes, we do. There's a coffee shop called Brood Awakening on Hawthorne Boulevard. Tomorrow, 10 a.m. Come alone, and come prepared to answer 6 years' worth of questions." The line went dead. Beckett stared at his phone, his hands shaking. In 18 hours, he would face the woman who had watched her daughter's heart break because of his cowardice. The woman who had helped raise the child he'd never known existed. He thought of Eli's innocent question. "Do you think my dad thinks about me sometimes?" "Every day, son. Every day for the rest of my life." But tomorrow, he would have to prove that thoughts weren't enough. Tomorrow he would have to face the possibility that some mistakes were too big to fix, and some second chances came too late. Because Nora Hart didn't sound like a woman who was planning to make this easy. Some conversations are unavoidable. Like storms, they gather whether you're ready or not. Beckett hadn't slept. He'd spent the night in his sterile hotel room, pacing between the window and the bed, rehearsing conversations that would never be adequate. How do you apologize for abandoning someone you didn't know existed? How do you explain 6 years of silence to a woman who'd watched her daughter cry herself to sleep? At 9:45 a.m., he stood outside Brood Awakening, his hands shaking as he gripped a coffee cup he couldn't taste. The cafe was quintessentially Portland. Exposed brick walls, mismatched furniture, and the kind of authentic atmosphere his Manhattan life had lost years ago. Through the window, he could see her. Nora Hart sat at a corner table, her silver hair catching the morning light, her green eyes so much like Callie's, fixed on the entrance. She wore a simple cardigan, and held her own coffee with the steady hands of someone who'd weathered plenty of storms. Beckett pushed through the door, the bell chiming his arrival like a funeral toll. "Mrs. Hart." He approached her table cautiously. "Sit." Her voice was not unkind, but it brooked no argument. "And call me Nora. We're past formalities." He sat across from her, feeling like a defendant facing judgment. Up close, he could see more of Callie in her face, the determined set of her jaw, the way she studied him like she was reading a story written in a foreign language. "You look older," she said finally. "I feel older." "Good. You should." She took a measured sip of her coffee. 6 years is a long time to disappear from someone's life. Beckett winced. "Nora, let me finish." Her tone was steel wrapped in velvet. 6 years ago, my daughter came to my house at 2 in the morning, sobbing so hard she couldn't speak. She was pregnant, alone, and convinced that the man she loved was too much of a coward to love her back. Each word hit Beckett like a physical blow. "I never knew she was pregnant. Because you never answered her call." Nora's eyes blazed. "One phone call, Beckett. One conversation could have changed everything. Instead, my daughter spent her pregnancy wondering if she mattered to you at all." "She mattered? God, she mattered more than anything." "Then why?" The question came out strangled, raw with years of watching her daughter hurt. "Why did you let her believe she was disposable?" Beckett stared into his coffee, seeing his reflection fractured in the dark surface. "Because I was terrified. Because I'd never loved anyone the way I loved Callie, and I convinced myself that meant I'd eventually destroy it. I thought I was protecting her. From what? From me. From my world. From contracts and prenups and photographers hiding in bushes. He looked up, meeting her fierce gaze. From becoming another casualty of my inability to trust anyone completely. Nora studied him for a long moment. You want to know what's funny? Callie used to defend you. Even after Eli was born, even when she was working 3 jobs to make ends meet, she'd tell me you were probably just scared. That maybe someday you'd be brave enough to love someone. The revelation gutted him. 3 jobs. Freelance journalism doesn't pay much, especially when you're starting over in a new city. But she never complained. Not once. She just worked harder, loved that boy fiercer, and built a life that didn't need you in it. But I want to be in it now. The words tumbled out desperately. Nora, I know I have no right to ask, but I want to try. I want to be his father. His father? Nora's laugh was sharp. You think fatherhood is something you can just step into after 5 years? Like a job you're finally ready to accept? I know it's more complicated than that. Do you? She leaned forward, her voice dropping to a whisper that somehow felt more dangerous than shouting. Do you know that Eli used to cry for his daddy every night when he was 3? Do you know he asked me once if he was broken because his father didn't want him? Beckett felt like he was drowning. Jesus, Nora. Do you know that Callie has panic attacks in grocery stores because she's terrified of running into you someday and not knowing what to say? Do you know she still flinches when her phone rings with unknown numbers? I'm sorry. The words felt pathetic, inadequate. I'm so sorry. Sorry doesn't give Eli back the bedtime stories he missed. Sorry doesn't erase the nights Callie cried herself to sleep wondering what she did wrong. Nora's voice cracked slightly. Sorry is just a word, Beckett. What matters is what you do next. Tell me what to do. Please. I'll do anything. Nora was quiet for a long time, studying his face like she was solving a puzzle. Finally, she spoke. Callie doesn't know you're here. She doesn't know you met Eli on that plane. She's been living in a fragile peace for 6 years, and I won't let you shatter that unless I'm certain you're here to stay. I am. I swear to you, I am. Prove it. She pulled a small piece of paper from her purse and slid it across the table. That's her address, but here's the deal. You don't get to show up and demand a place in their lives. You earn it. Slowly, carefully, and if you hurt either of them again, I'll make sure you regret it for the rest of your natural life. Beckett picked up the paper with trembling hands. An address on a quiet street in southeast Portland, the place where his son lived, where Callie had built the life he'd been too afraid to share. Why are you giving me this chance? He asked. Nora's expression softened slightly. Because yesterday, for the first time in 6 years, Eli came home talking about a man who was kind to him. And because as much as I hate what you did to my daughter, she deserves to make her own choice about whether to forgive you. She stood to leave, then paused. Beckett, that little boy in there, he's the best of both of you. Don't you dare let him become collateral damage in your guilt. And as Nora Hart walked away, leaving him alone with his coffee and his regrets, Beckett realized that earning forgiveness would be the hardest thing he'd ever done, and the only thing that mattered. Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's standing on a doorstep knowing everything could change. The house at 1247 Maple Street was nothing like Beckett had expected. No white picket fence, no manicured lawn. Just a small, weathered bungalow with chipped blue paint and a garden that looked loved rather than landscaped. Wind chimes hung from the porch, creating a gentle melody that somehow made his chest ache. This was where Callie lived, where she'd raised their son, where she'd built a life that had nothing to do with marble countertops and floor-to-ceiling windows. Beckett sat in his rental car across the street for 20 minutes, his hands gripping the steering wheel like an anchor. Through the front window, he could see the warm glow of lamps, the suggestion of a life being lived. A bicycle with training wheels leaned against the porch steps. Eli's bike. The front door opened, and Beckett's heart stopped. Callie stepped out, keys in hand, looking exactly like the woman who'd haunted his dreams for 6 years. Her auburn hair was shorter now, barely touching her shoulders, and she looked tired in a way that spoke of long nights and early mornings. But she was still beautiful in that effortless way that had always made him forget to breathe. She was heading toward a beat-up Honda Civic parked in the driveway when she noticed the unfamiliar car across the street. Her journalist instincts kicked in. Beckett watched her catalog details, memorize his license plate, assess potential threats. Then her gaze found his through the windshield. The keys slipped from her fingers, hitting the concrete with a metallic jangle that seemed to echo in the sudden stillness. Even from 50 feet away, Beckett could see her face cycle through emotions: shock, disbelief, anger, and something else he couldn't quite read. She stood frozen for what felt like an eternity, then slowly, so slowly, began walking toward his car. Beckett got out, his legs unsteady. They met in the middle of the empty street like gunslingers in an old western, each step weighted with 6 years of silence. Beckett. Her voice was carefully neutral, but he caught the slight tremor she was trying to hide. Callie. Up close, he could see the faint lines around her eyes, the small scar above her left eyebrow that hadn't been there before. Life had marked her in ways he hadn't been there to witness. "What are you doing here?" The question wasn't accusatory, just tired, like she'd been expecting this moment for years and was exhausted by its arrival. "I met him." The words came out before he could soften them. "On a plane. Yesterday. He told me his mom's name was Callie Hart." The color drained from her face. "You met Eli?" "Seat 12B. He was traveling alone to see his grandmother." Beckett's voice cracked. "He has my eyes, Callie. He has my eyes and my laugh and that nervous tick I had as a kid when I got excited." Callie wrapped her arms around herself, a gesture of protection he remembered all too well. "You don't know that he's—" "Don't." The word came out sharper than he intended. "Please don't make me pretend I don't know he's mine." She stared at him for a long moment, then let out a laugh that sounded dangerously close to sobbing. 5 years, Beckett. He's 5 years old and you're just now—" She stopped, shaking her head. "God, I can't do this in the street. Can we go inside?" "No." The answer was immediate. Protective. That's his space, his safe place. "You don't get to." She paused, took a breath. "There's a park 2 blocks over. Laurelhurst. Meet me there in 10 minutes. She turned and walked back toward her house, leaving Beckett standing in the middle of Maple Street with his heart pounding against his ribs. 10 minutes later, he found her sitting on a bench overlooking the park's small pond. She'd changed into jeans and a worn sweater that looked like it had been through 1,000 washings. Her hair was pulled back in a ponytail and she looked younger, more like the woman he'd fallen in love with 7 years ago. "He's with my mother tonight," she said without looking at him. Sleepover after his big airplane adventure. He couldn't stop talking about his new friend Beckett, who knew his mom. Beckett sat down beside her, careful to leave space between them. "He's incredible, Callie, smart and kind and—" "Don't." Her voice was quiet but firm. "Don't you dare sit here and tell me about my son like you're discovering him. I know who he is. I've known every day for 5 years. I know. I'm sorry, I just—" "Why now?" She finally looked at him, and her green eyes were bright with unshed tears. 6 years of nothing. 6 years of wondering if you even remembered I existed. And now you show up because you accidentally sat next to a child who might be yours? I tried to call you back that last night. I picked up the phone 100 times, but you never actually dialed." The words were like a slap. "Do you know what that last message said, Beckett? Do you even remember?" He closed his eyes. "You said you were pregnant, and that you weren't asking for anything, just that you thought I should know. I also said I loved you, that whatever was scaring you, we could figure it out together, that I wasn't going anywhere unless you made me." Her voice broke slightly. "And your silence told me everything I needed to know about how much that love was worth to you." They sat in silence, watching ducks glide across the pond's surface. A jogger passed by, earbuds in, oblivious to the conversation that was reshaping 2 lives on a park bench. "I was scared," Beckett said finally. "Terrified that I'd turn into my father. Cold, controlling, treating love like a business transaction. I thought if I loved you less, I'd hurt you less. So instead, you hurt me completely." Callie wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "Do you know what the worst part was? It wasn't the pregnancy or raising him alone or working 60-hour weeks to keep food on the table. It was wondering what I'd done wrong, what I'd said or didn't say that made you decide I wasn't worth fighting for. You didn't do anything wrong. God, Callie, you were perfect. You are perfect. That was the problem. I knew I'd find a way to ruin it." She turned to face him fully. "You did ruin it, Beckett. Just not the way you thought you would." The words hung between them like a bridge neither was ready to cross. Finally, Callie stood. "I need time. To think. To figure out what this means for Eli." She paused. "He doesn't know who you are. As far as he's concerned, his dad is just somewhere else. And I won't have him hurt because you're having some kind of crisis of conscience. I want to be his father, Callie. Really be his father. Wanting isn't enough." She started walking away, then stopped. "I'm not the same woman who loved you 6 years ago, Beckett, and I won't be anyone's second choice ever again. As she disappeared into the gathering dusk, Beckett realized that earning back her trust would be even harder than he'd imagined, because this time, he wasn't just fighting for love. He was fighting for the right to be the father his son deserved. Redemption doesn't come in grand gestures. It lives in the quiet moments when nobody's watching. 3 days passed in silence. 3 days of Beckett haunting Portland's coffee shops and bookstores, hoping for a glimpse of auburn hair or the sound of a 5-year-old's laughter. He'd canceled every meeting back in New York, ignored 17 calls from his board of directors, and spent more time staring at his phone than he had since college. On Thursday morning, his phone finally buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Eli wants to know if his airplane friend is still in Portland. See, Beckett's hands shook as he typed back, "Yes. Does he want to see me?" The response came 20 minutes later. Saturday, Burnside Skate Park, 2 p.m. Don't read more into this than it is. Saturday couldn't come fast enough. Beckett arrived at the skate park 30 minutes early, his stomach churning with the kind of nerves he hadn't felt since his first board meeting. The park was alive with teenagers on skateboards and BMX bikes, their shouts and laughter echoing off concrete bowls and metal rails. He felt ancient and out of place in his dark jeans and button-down shirt. Then he saw them. Callie was sitting on a bench near the playground section, her laptop balanced on her knees, fingers flying across the keyboard. She wore torn jeans and a faded t-shirt that read, "Question Everything," so perfectly her that it made his chest ache. Eli was on the swings nearby, pumping his legs with fierce determination, his dark hair catching the afternoon sunlight. "Higher, Mom. Watch me go higher," he called out. "I'm watching, baby." "Be careful," Callie replied without looking up from her screen, the kind of multitasking that spoke of years of solo parenting. Beckett approached slowly, like he might approach a wild animal, careful not to startle, not to disrupt the delicate ecosystem of their Saturday afternoon. "Beckett!" Eli's voice rang out across the playground. He leaped off the swing mid-arc, landing with the fearless confidence of childhood, and ran toward him. "You're still here. I told Mom you were really nice and she said maybe we could see you again." Beckett knelt to Eli's level, fighting the urge to pull him into a hug. "Hey, buddy, how was the rest of your visit with Grandma Nora?" "Amazing. We made 17 moon cookies and she showed me pictures of Mom when she was little. Mom had braces and really funny hair." Eli giggled, then dropped his voice to a conspiratorial whisper. "Don't tell her I said that. She gets embarrassed." Callie had closed her laptop and was watching them with an expression Beckett couldn't quite read. Not warm, but not hostile either. Cautious, like she was studying a chemistry experiment that might explode. "Hi," she said simply when Beckett stood up. "Hi. Thank you for this." She shrugged. "He's been asking about you all week. Apparently you made quite an impression." Eli tugged on Beckett's shirt. "Do you want to see me do monkey bars? I can do almost all of them now. Mom says I'm getting really strong. I'd love to see that." For the next hour, Beckett found himself living in a parallel universe where he was just a man watching a little boy play. Eli showed him every piece of playground equipment with the thorough dedication of a tour guide, chattering constantly about school and his best friend Marcus and his pet goldfish named Captain Bubbles who did tricks. "Watch this," Eli called from the top of the slide. "This is my superhero landing." He came down the slide with his arms spread wide, landing in a crouch with his fist on the ground. "Ta-da!" "That was incredible," Beckett said, and meant it. "Where did you learn to do that?" "I made it up. Mom says I have a big imagination like her." Eli glanced toward the bench where Callie was pretending to work while obviously listening to every word. "She writes stories about bad guys who do mean things. She's like a superhero too, but with a computer instead of a cape." Beckett looked at Callie, who was now openly watching them, her expression softer than it had been all afternoon. "Your mom is definitely a superhero. Do you want to push me on the swings? Mom's busy with her important work and I can't get high enough by myself." Beckett glanced at Callie, who gave him a barely perceptible nod. "I'd be honored." As he pushed Eli's swing, listening to the boys' delighted laughter, Beckett felt something he hadn't experienced in years. Pure, uncomplicated joy. No board meetings, no profit margins, no 5-year plans, just this moment, this child, this simple act of making someone happy. "Beckett," Eli's voice was thoughtful now, less excited. "Can I ask you something? Anything? Do you have kids?" Beckett's hands stilled on the swing. Behind him, he could hear Callie's typing stop. "What made you ask that?" "You're really good at this. And you look at me the same way Mrs. Rodriguez looks at her daughter at school." Like, like I'm really important. Because you are. Because you're the most important thing in the world and I didn't even know you existed. I think all kids are important, Beckett said carefully. But do you have your own? The question hung in the air like a soap bubble. Beautiful, fragile, ready to burst. Beckett found himself looking toward Callie, who was staring at him with an expression he couldn't decode. No, he said finally. I don't have kids. But I think I'd like to someday. Eli resumed swinging, apparently satisfied with the answer. I bet you'd be a really good dad. You have nice hands and you don't get impatient when I talk a lot. Jesus. 20 minutes later, Eli was engrossed in a game with some other children, and Beckett found himself sitting beside Callie on the bench. She'd closed her laptop completely now, her attention divided between watching Eli and studying Beckett's profile. He likes you, she said quietly. I like him too, more than I knew was possible. Beckett, she paused, choosing her words carefully. I need you to understand something. That little boy over there, he's everything to me. My whole world revolves around making sure he feels loved and safe and valued. I won't let anyone, not even you, make him feel like he's not enough. I would never. You already did, just by existing and not being here. Her voice was soft but unwavering. He's going to start asking questions about why you're around now, about who you are and why you care. And when he does, I need to know that you're prepared to answer them honestly. Beckett watched Eli climb across monkey bars, his small face screwed up in concentration. What do you want me to tell him? The truth. When you're ready. When I'm ready. When he's ready. She stood up, gathering her things. But Beckett, if you're not absolutely certain you want to be in his life forever, then walk away now. Because I won't let you break his heart the way you broke mine. She called Eli over and they gathered his backpack and water bottle with the practiced efficiency of a team that had been operating together for years. Bye, Beckett. Eli waved enthusiastically. Will I see you again soon? Beckett looked at Callie, who was watching him with those penetrating green eyes. If your mom says it's okay, I'd really like that. Eli looked between them, his 5-year-old intuition clearly picking up on undercurrents he couldn't quite understand. Mom, can Beckett come to my soccer game next week? Coach says families can come watch. Families. Callie's face went through a series of micro-expressions before settling on something resembling resignation. We'll see, baby. Say goodbye for now. As they walked away, Eli's hand tucked securely in his mother's, Beckett heard him ask, Mom, why do you look sad when you talk to Beckett? He couldn't hear her answer, but he saw her kneel down to Eli's level, saw her cup his face in her hands the way her mother had done at the airport. Whatever she told him made the boy nod seriously, before throwing his arms around her neck in a fierce hug, and Beckett realized that earning the right to be part of that circle, that complete perfect unit of two, would require more courage than he'd ever needed to build his empire. The hardest battles are fought on soccer fields, where 5-year-olds show you what courage really looks like. Saturday morning arrived gray and drizzling, typical Portland weather that made everything look like a watercolor painting left in the rain. Beckett stood at the edge of Laurelhurst Park's soccer field, watching miniature athletes in oversized jerseys chase a ball with the kind of passionate chaos only children could achieve. He'd been standing there for 20 minutes, too nervous to approach the cluster of parents on the sideline. What if Callie had changed her mind? What if she'd only said yes to avoid disappointing Eli? What if he didn't belong here among these suburban families with their folding chairs and snack schedules? Beckett. A familiar voice cut through his spiral of doubt. Eli was running toward him, his jersey 3 sizes too big and his shin guards crooked, his face lit up like Christmas morning. You came! I wasn't sure if you'd really come, but Mom said you would because you seem like someone who keeps promises. Someone who keeps promises. If only that were true. I wouldn't miss it, buddy. You look like a real professional in that uniform. I'm number 7. Coach says that's a good number for fast runners, and I'm really fast. Want to see? Without waiting for an answer, Eli took off across the field, his cleats slipping slightly on the wet grass, his arms pumping with determined effort. Eli, back with your team. Callie's voice carried across the field. She was approaching with a folding chair under one arm and a thermos in her hand, wearing jeans and a rain jacket that had seen better days. Her hair was pulled back in a messy bun, and she looked tired but beautiful in the way that comes from watching your child chase their dreams. Hi, she said, when she reached him, her tone carefully neutral. Hi, thank you for texting me the details. I said I would. She unfolded her chair and gestured vaguely toward the other parents. You can sit if you want. Fair warning, though. These games can get a little intense. Parents take kindergarten soccer very seriously here. As if to prove her point, a man in an expensive North Face jacket shouted, "Come on, Bryce, aggressive, be aggressive." Callie rolled her eyes. That's Trevor's dad. He played Division I soccer 20 years ago and apparently thinks Trev is his second chance at the pros. Beckett looked around at the assembled parents, mostly mothers with coffee cups and fathers checking their phones. Everyone settled into the comfortable rhythm of Saturday morning routines. They all belonged here. They all knew each other's kids' names and dietary restrictions and carpool schedules. Does Eli ever ask about the other dads? He found himself asking. Callie's grip tightened on her thermos. Sometimes, usually after games when all the kids are talking about their families. He's gotten good at changing the subject. Fuck. Callie, Game's starting. The whistle blew, and 20 kindergartners took the field with the kind of enthusiasm usually reserved for natural disasters. Eli was in the middle of the pack, his tongue poking out slightly in concentration as he chased the ball. Go, Eli! You've got this, Callie shouted, cupping her hands around her mouth. For the next 20 minutes, Beckett watched his son, navigate the beautiful chaos of children's soccer. Eli wasn't the most skilled player on the field, but he was determined, encouraging his teammates when they fell, and celebrating every small victory like it was the World Cup. Midway through the second half, disaster struck. Eli was running full speed toward the ball when another player accidentally tripped him. He went down hard, his small body hitting the wet grass with a sound that made every parent wince. The field went quiet. Eli sat up slowly, grass stains on his jersey, his face scrunched up in the universal expression of a child trying not to cry in front of an audience. Beckett was moving before he realized it, his body responding to an instinct he didn't know he possessed. But Callie was faster. She was on the field in seconds, kneeling beside Eli, her hands checking for injuries while she whispered comfort. I'm okay, Mom, Eli said, but his voice was shaky. I'm tough, remember? Heart tough. You're the toughest, she agreed, helping him to his feet. But tough guys can still take a break when they need one. The coach jogged over, a kind-faced woman in her 30s who clearly knew Eli well. How are we doing, superstar? I think I'm okay, Coach Jenny. My knee hurts a little, but not bad. Coach Jenny examined his scraped knee with the practiced eye of someone who'd seen 1,000 playground injuries. I think you're good to keep playing if you want to. What do you say, Mom? Callie looked to Eli, letting him make the choice. What do you think, baby? Eli looked around the field at his teammates waiting to resume play, at the parents watching from the sideline. His gaze found Beckett in the crowd, and something in his young face shifted, a decision being made, courage being summoned. I want to keep playing, he said firmly. But can Beckett come closer to the field, so I can see him? Every parent on the sideline turned to look at Beckett. He felt exposed, studied, like a specimen under a microscope. But Eli was looking at him with such hope, such trust that nothing else mattered. Of course, Beckett said, moving to the edge of the field. For the remainder of the game, every time Eli made a play, good or bad, he would look toward the sideline and wave at Beckett. Each wave was like a small hand reaching directly into Beckett's chest and rearranging everything inside. With 5 minutes left in the game, the impossible happened. The ball rolled directly to Eli's feet, and for once no other players were around him. He looked up, saw the goal ahead of him, and started running. Go, Eli, go, go, go! Callie was on her feet, her professional composure completely abandoned. Beckett found himself shouting too, his voice joining the chorus of parents who'd become invested in this small boy's moment of glory. Run, buddy. You've got it. Eli kicked the ball with all his 5-year-old might. It wasn't pretty, and it wasn't particularly accurate, but it rolled slowly, inevitably into the corner of the goal. The field erupted. Eli's teammates mobbed him in a pile of small bodies and enormous joy. The parents cheered like they'd witnessed a miracle, and maybe they had. The miracle of a child believing in himself and being proven right. When Eli emerged from the celebration, his face was radiant with pride and disbelief. He ran straight to the sideline, straight to where Callie and Beckett were standing side by side. Did you see? Did you both see? I scored a goal. He was bouncing on his toes, unable to contain his excitement. We saw, baby. We saw the whole thing, Callie said, pulling him into a fierce hug. Beckett, did you see my goal? I saw it. It was perfect. You were perfect. The words came out rougher than intended, weighted with emotions he hadn't expected to feel. Eli threw his arms around Beckett's legs in an impulsive hug that nearly knocked him over. "Thank you for coming. Thank you for watching." Over Eli's head, Beckett met Callie's eyes. For just a moment, her careful guard slipped, and he saw something there that looked almost like forgiveness. But then Eli was pulling back, chattering about post-game snacks and next week's practice, and the moment dissolved into the mundane magic of childhood enthusiasm. As they walked toward the parking lot, Eli between them, his small hands reaching up to hold both of theirs, Beckett realized something profound. This wasn't about earning his way back into Callie's life anymore. This was about earning his way into the life of a little boy who waved at him from soccer fields and trusted him with his biggest moments. And for the first time in 6 years, Beckett felt like he might actually be worthy of that trust. Truth has its own timeline. It arrives not when we're ready, but when it can no longer be contained. The call came at 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday. Beckett was in his hotel room, laptop balanced on his knees, trying to convince himself he was working when really he was scrolling through Callie's old articles for the 100th time. Her byline photo from 3 years ago showed her accepting an award for investigative journalism, her smile proud but tired, and he wondered if she still got that little crease between her eyebrows when she was concentrating. His phone buzzed. Callie's number. "Hello?" he answered on the first ring. "Beckett." Her voice was strained, barely controlled. "I need your help." He was already reaching for his shoes. "What's wrong? Is it Eli?" "He's in the hospital. Providence Portland Medical Center. Room 314. Her voice cracked. "He was running a fever all day, and then tonight he started having trouble breathing and—" "I'm on my way." The line went quiet for a moment. "You don't have to—" "Callie, I'm already in the car." 23 minutes later, Beckett burst through the doors of the pediatric ward like a man possessed. He found room 314 by following the sound of Callie's voice. Low, soothing, reading what sounded like a picture book. He paused in the doorway, his heart clenching at the scene before him. Eli was propped up in a hospital bed that dwarfed his small frame, an oxygen cannula under his nose, and an IV in his tiny arm. His face was flushed with fever, but he was listening intently as Callie read from a worn copy of Where the Wild Things Are. And Max, the king of all wild things, was lonely and wanted to be where someone loved him best of all, she read, her voice steady despite the tears streaming down her cheeks. "Mom," Eli whispered, his voice hoarse. "Do you think Max's mom was scared when he was gone?" "I think she was very scared, baby. But I think she never stopped believing he would come home." That's when Eli noticed Beckett in the doorway. His fever-bright eyes widened with surprise and something that looked like relief. "Beckett, you came to the hospital. Are you a doctor too?" Callie's head snapped up, and for a moment her careful composure cracked completely. She looked exhausted, terrified, and younger than her 32 years. "I didn't think you'd actually come," she whispered. "Of course I came." Beckett stepped into the room, his eyes cataloging every wire, every machine, every sign of his son's distress. "How is he?" "Pneumonia," she said, wiping her eyes quickly. "They caught it early, but his oxygen levels dropped and—" Her voice broke. "I was so scared." "Hey, buddy," Beckett said, approaching Eli's bedside. "How are you feeling?" "Kinda yucky, but better now that you're here. The doctors gave me medicine in a tube." Eli pointed to his IV with the matter-of-fact acceptance children have for medical procedures. "It doesn't hurt much. Mom says I'm being really brave." "You're the bravest kid I know," Beckett said, and meant it. "Is there anything I can get you? Ice cream, a new book?" Eli's eyes lit up despite his illness. "Ice cream would be good, but Mom says I can't have cold stuff right now because of my throat. When you're better then, we'll get the biggest ice cream sundae they make. With extra whipped cream? With extra everything." Callie watched this exchange with an expression Beckett couldn't quite read. Gratitude, maybe, or surprise, or something more complicated that lived somewhere between love and loss. A nurse appeared in the doorway, a kind-faced woman in scrubs covered with cartoon dinosaurs. "How are we doing in here?" "Eli, sweetie, time to check your temperature again." As the nurse bustled around, checking monitors and making notes, she smiled at Beckett. "You must be Dad. Eli's been talking about you all evening. My friend Beckett is really tall, and he knows my mom, and he comes to my soccer games." She laughed. "He's quite the chatterbox when he's not feeling well." Beckett felt the world tilt. The nurse had assumed he was Eli's father, and neither Callie nor Eli had corrected her. He caught Callie's eye, looking for guidance, for permission, for any sign of what he was supposed to say. She looked away. "Temperature's coming down. the nurse announced cheerfully. That's excellent news. The antibiotics are definitely working. Doctor, Morrison will want to keep you overnight for observation, but I think someone's going home tomorrow. Yay. Eli cheered weakly. Will you still be here tomorrow, Beckett? In Portland, I mean? Yes, he said without hesitation. I'll be here as long as you need me. Something shifted in Callie's expression. A wall coming down or maybe going up. Eli, baby, try to get some sleep. The medicine works better when you're resting. Can Beckett stay for a little while? Please? I sleep better when people I like are nearby. People I like. Such simple words that carried the weight of everything Beckett had never known he wanted. If your mom says it's okay, I'd be happy to stay. Callie nodded, settling back into the uncomfortable hospital chair she'd clearly been occupying for hours. Just until he falls asleep. For the next hour, they took turns telling Eli stories. Callie sharing tales from her childhood. Beckett making up adventures about brave knights and their faithful dragons. Gradually, Eli's eyes grew heavy, his small hand curled around the hospital blanket, his breathing becoming deeper and more regular. When they were certain he was asleep, Callie gestured toward the hallway. They stepped outside, leaving the door cracked so they could hear if he stirred. Thank you, she said quietly, for coming. You didn't have to. Yes, I did. The words came out more forcefully than he intended. Callie, he's my son. She leaned against the wall, suddenly looking every one of her sleepless hours. I know. Then why haven't you told him? Because, she rubbed her temples, a gesture he remembered from their life together. Because once I tell him, everything changes. For him, for me, for you, and I need to know that you're ready for that. I am ready. Are you? Really? She looked at him with those penetrating green eyes. Because being his father isn't just showing up for soccer games and hospital visits. It's scraped knees and nightmares and homework battles and teenage rebellion. It's being there even when it's boring, even when it's hard, even when there's no crisis to solve. I want all of it. You say that now. But what happens when your board calls and demands you come back to New York? What happens when your real life starts calling again? This is my real life. The words came out with a certainty that surprised him. Callie, I've been sleepwalking for 6 years. These past few weeks, watching him play soccer, seeing him be brave in that hospital bed. This is the most real I've felt since you left. She studied his face in the harsh fluorescent light of the hospital hallway. He's going to ask questions. Hard ones. Why you weren't there before, why you stayed away, whether you're going to leave again. Then I'll answer them, honestly. And if the answers hurt him, then I'll spend the rest of my life making sure he knows he's wanted, that he's loved, that leaving him was the biggest mistake I ever made. But I'm here now, and I'm not going anywhere. Callie was quiet for a long moment, her eyes fixed on the floor. When she looked up, there were tears in her eyes, but also something that looked like resolution. Okay, she whispered. Okay? When he's feeling better. When we're back home and he's not dealing with being sick. We'll tell him. She paused. Together. Through the cracked door, they could hear Eli's quiet breathing, the soft beep of monitors, the sounds of a child healing. Together, Beckett repeated, and for the first time in 6 years, the word felt like a promise he might actually be able to keep. Because sometimes the most important conversations happen in hospital hallways, where the truth finally finds its voice. Some words can never be taken back. They reshape the world the moment they're spoken. 3 days after the hospital, Eli was back to his normal, energetic self, racing around the small backyard behind Callie's house, while she and Beckett sat on the back porch, nursing cups of coffee that had gone cold an hour ago. They'd been trying to find the right words, the right moment, the right way to turn a 5-year-old's world upside down. We could wait, Callie said for the 3rd time, her voice thin with anxiety, until he's older, until he asks more direct questions. No, Beckett's voice was gentle but firm. We've all waited long enough. Through the screen door, they could hear Eli in the living room, building an elaborate fort out of couch cushions and blankets. His chatter was constant, a running commentary on his architectural decisions that made both adults smile despite their nerves. Mom, Beckett, come see my castle. It has a drawbridge and everything. Callie took a shaky breath. Okay, now or never. They found Eli crouched inside his blanket fort, arranging action figures with the serious concentration of a military strategist. His dark hair was still mussed from his afternoon nap, and he looked so young, so innocent, that Beckett felt a moment of panic. What if this ruined everything? What if knowing the truth was worse than wondering? This is amazing, buddy, Beckett said, crouching down to admire the fort's engineering. You could be an architect someday. What's an architect? Someone who designs buildings, who figures out how to make spaces where people can live and work and be happy. Like how Mom makes spaces in her stories for people to understand things. Callie's breath caught. Even at 5, Eli understood more about the world than most adults gave him credit for. Exactly like that, she said softly. Eli, can you come sit with us for a minute? We need to talk to you about something important. His young face grew serious. Am I in trouble? I didn't break anything, I promise. You're not in trouble, baby. Not even close. Callie settled onto the couch, patting the space beside her. But we need to tell you something that might seem kind of big and maybe confusing at first. Eli climbed up beside her, his small body automatically curling into her side. Beckett sat across from them, his hands clasped so tightly his knuckles were white. You know how you've asked me about your dad sometimes? Callie began carefully. Eli nodded. You always say he's far away and busy with important work. That's true, but there's more to the story. She looked at Beckett, her eyes asking one last time if he was ready for this. Your dad, he's not far away anymore. He came back. Where is he? Can I meet him? Eli's questions tumbled out in an excited rush. Callie's voice was barely a whisper. Baby, your dad is Beckett. The room went completely silent. Eli's eyes went wide, darting between his mother and the man he'd known as his airplane friend, his soccer game buddy, his hospital visitor. His young mind was clearly working, processing, trying to make sense of this information. Beckett is my dad? He asked finally, his voice small and uncertain. Yes, Beckett said, his voice rough with emotion. I'm your dad, Eli. But why didn't you tell me before? Why did you pretend to be just my friend? The questions Callie had warned him about, the ones that would hurt. Beckett leaned forward, meeting Eli's confused gaze directly. Because I made some really big mistakes, buddy. Before you were born, I was scared of being a dad, and I made some choices that hurt your mom. When you were born, I didn't know about you, and by the time I could have found out, I was too scared and too ashamed to try. Eli's brow furrowed in concentration. But you're not scary. You're nice and you come to my soccer games and you stayed with me at the hospital. I'm different now than I was then. Meeting you on that airplane, it changed everything for me. The airplane! Eli's eyes lit up with understanding. You recognized me. That's why you looked so surprised. You have my eyes, Beckett said softly. The same eyes I see in the mirror every day. The moment I saw you, I knew. Eli looked back and forth between them, his 5-year-old brain working to process this monumental shift in his understanding of the world. So all those times I wondered what my dad looked like. You were right there? Yes. And when I asked you if you thought my dad thought about me, I think about you every single day. I have since the moment I met you. Eli was quiet for a long moment, his small fingers playing with the hem of his shirt. When he looked up, his eyes, those gray eyes that matched Beckett's perfectly, were bright with unshed tears. Are you going to leave again? The question hung in the air like a prayer, like a test, like everything that mattered in the world condensed into 7 small words. No, Beckett said immediately. Never. I'm here now, and I'm staying, if you'll have me. What does that mean? It means... Beckett looked at Callie, who nodded encouragingly. It means I want to be your real dad. Not just someone who visits sometimes, but someone who's here for bedtime stories and scraped knees and soccer games and everything else. Someone you can count on. Eli considered this with the gravity of a much older child. Would you live here with us? We haven't figured all that out yet, Callie said gently. But whatever we decide, it will be what's best for you. Can I still call you Beckett? Dad feels big. You can call me whatever feels right to you, Beckett said. Beckett, Dad, or anything else you want, there's no rush. Eli nodded slowly, then surprised them both by sliding off the couch and walking over to Beckett. Without hesitation, he climbed into Beckett's lap and wrapped his small arms around his neck. I'm glad you're my dad, he whispered. I always hoped my dad would be someone nice like you. Beckett's vision blurred as he wrapped his arms around his son, really held him as his son for the first time. Over Eli's head, he met Callie's eyes and saw her own tears falling freely. I'm glad too, buddy, he managed. I'm so glad too. They sat like that for a long time. 3 people who had been separate becoming something like a family. Outside, the Portland rain began to fall, drumming softly on the roof of the little house where love was finally finding its way home. Beckett, Dad? Eli said finally, pulling back to look at him. Yeah? Can we finish building my fort together? I think it needs a really strong foundation. Beckett looked at this remarkable child, his child, and felt something click into place in his chest, something that had been broken for 6 long years. I think you're absolutely right. Strong foundations are the most important part. And as they knelt together on the living room floor, building something solid and safe and permanent, Beckett realized that sometimes the best architecture isn't made of steel and stone. It's built from truth and time and the infinite patience of a 5-year-old who's willing to call you dad. Love isn't a destination. It's a choice you make every single day, especially when it's hard. 6 weeks later, Beckett stood in the kitchen of Callie's small house at dawn, trying to figure out how to make pancakes that wouldn't resemble charcoal. Through the window, he could see the first hints of sunrise painting the Portland sky in shades of rose and gold. Somewhere upstairs, Eli was still sleeping, curled up with the stuffed dragon Beckett had bought him after his first week of calling him Dad, without hesitation. The adjustment hadn't been seamless. There had been tears, mostly Beckett's, when Eli had his first nightmare and instinctively called for his mom, not his newly revealed father. There had been the awkward dance of learning to share space, share decisions, share the enormous responsibility of raising a child who deserved better than the adults who'd created his complicated beginning. But there had also been magic. The first time Eli had grabbed Beckett's hand without thinking about it. The evening when he'd fallen asleep during story time, his head heavy on Beckett's shoulder. The morning when he'd announced to his kindergarten class that his dad was really tall and knows about computers and makes funny voices when he reads books. You're going to burn the house down. Callie's voice came from the doorway, rough with sleep and laughter. Beckett turned to find her leaning against the doorframe, her auburn hair a mess, wearing an old NYU t-shirt he vaguely remembered from their life together 6 years ago. She looked rumpled and beautiful, and like home in a way that made his chest ache. I'm trying to master the ancient art of Sunday morning pancakes, he said, gesturing helplessly at the smoking pan. Apparently, there's more technique involved than I anticipated. Here, let me... She moved beside him, her shoulder brushing his as she adjusted the heat and salvaged what remained of the batter. The trick is patience, and lower heat, and actually watching what you're doing instead of staring out the window like you're planning to escape. I'm not planning to escape. I know. Her voice was soft, but there was something underneath it. A hesitation he'd learned to recognize over the past month and a half. But sometimes I catch you looking like you can't quite believe this is real. He set down the spatula and turned to face her fully. Because I can't. Because 6 weeks ago I was living in a glass tower in Manhattan, convinced I was too broken to love anyone properly. And now I'm here trying not to poison my son with my cooking, wearing jeans that cost less than my old lunch meetings, and I've never been happier. Beckett, I know what you're going to say. That this is still new. That the real test comes when the novelty wears off. When Eli has tantrums and I have bad days and we have to figure out how to actually build a life together. He reached for her hands, holding them gently. But Callie, I'm not the same man who was too scared to answer your call 6 years ago. Before she could respond, the sound of small feet thundered down the stairs, followed by Eli's sleep-rough voice. Is someone making pancakes? I smell pancakes. And also maybe something burning? Your dad is learning. Callie called back, not taking her eyes off Beckett's face. Can I help? I'm really good at stirring. Eli burst into the kitchen wearing dinosaur pajamas and hair that defied gravity, his gray eyes bright with the enthusiasm only children possess before 7 a.m. He launched himself at Beckett with the fearless affection that still caught him off guard every single time. Good morning, Dad. Dad. 6 weeks. And the words still hit him like lightning. Good morning, buddy. Want to help me not burn breakfast? For the next 30 minutes, the kitchen was chaos in the best possible way. Eli helped by adding chocolate chips to the batter with generous abandon, narrating his every action like he was hosting a cooking show. Callie rescued multiple batches from certain doom while pretending she wasn't keeping a careful eye on every interaction between father and son. They were sitting down to their imperfect but edible breakfast when Eli made the announcement that changed everything. Cooper's having a dad and me camp out next weekend for Cub Scouts, he said around a mouthful of pancake. Can we go, Dad? The question was innocent, casual, the kind of thing any child might ask any father. But Beckett felt the weight of it, the trust implicit in that simple request. Eli wasn't just asking him to attend an event. He was asking him to be present, to show up, to be the kind of father who said yes to adventures. I'd love to go camping with you, Beckett said. Fair warning, though, I've never actually been camping. You might have to teach me a few things. Eli's face lit up like Christmas. I can teach you everything. How to make s'mores and how to find the Big Dipper and how to zip up a sleeping bag really fast if you hear scary noises. Scary noises? Probably just raccoons, Eli said, with the authority of someone who'd clearly been briefed by other kindergarten camping experts. But sometimes bears. Mom says bears are more scared of us than we are of them. But I think that's not totally true. Callie laughed, and the sound was like sunshine breaking through clouds. Bears are definitely more scared of you than you are of them, baby. Especially when you sing camp songs as loudly as you usually do. I don't sing loud, I sing enthusiastic. As they finished breakfast, Eli chattering about camping supplies and s'mores techniques, Beckett felt something settle in his chest, a peace he'd never experienced, a certainty that felt like coming home after a lifetime of being lost. Later, after Eli had gone outside to practice his wilderness skills in the backyard, Callie and Beckett found themselves alone in the quiet kitchen, the morning dishes forgotten between them. He's going to ask you to move in soon, she said quietly, not looking at him. Officially, I mean. He's been dropping hints for weeks. And what would you say if he did? She was quiet for so long he thought she wouldn't answer. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. I'd say yes. The simple words hit him like a physical blow. Callie, I'm terrified, she continued, finally meeting his eyes. Terrified that this is too good to be true. Terrified that I'm setting myself up to be hurt again. Terrified that I'm gambling with Eli's happiness as much as my own. But watching you with him, seeing how gentle you are, how patient, how you light up when he calls you Dad, she wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. I think maybe love is supposed to be terrifying. Maybe that's how you know it matters. Through the window, they could see Eli attempting to build a shelter out of garden stakes and an old tarp, his tongue poking out in concentration, completely absorbed in his mission. I love him, Beckett said, more than I knew it was possible to love anyone. And I love you, still love you, always loved you, even when I was too much of a coward to admit it. I know. She reached across the table, her fingers intertwining with his. I love you too. Still. Again. It's complicated. The best things usually are. From the backyard came the sound of Eli's voice calling out in triumph. Mom! Dad! Come see my fort! It's really strong this time. It's not going to fall down no matter what. They looked at each other and started laughing. Not because anything was particularly funny, but because sometimes joy needs to escape, needs to be shared, needs to fill the spaces between heartache and hope. Come on, Callie said, standing and pulling him toward the door. Let's go see what our son built. Our son. As they stepped into the morning sunlight, Eli running toward them with his arms spread wide like he could embrace the entire world, Beckett realized that some stories don't have endings. They have beginnings that look like endings. Moments when everything changes and nothing changes. When love finds a way to write itself into the spaces between what was lost and what might still be found. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, those stories look like a 5-year-old boy who builds forts that won't fall down, no matter what storms might come. 2 years later, some endings are really beginnings, disguised as something final, but carrying the seeds of everything that comes next. The house on Maple Street looked different now. The chipped blue paint had been replaced with warm sage green, chosen by committee after Eli insisted that houses should look happy from the outside so people know happy people live inside. The garden bloomed with vegetables that actually grew under Callie's patient tending and Beckett's enthusiastic overwatering. A tire swing hung from the old oak tree in the backyard, installed by a man who'd learned that some of life's best investments couldn't be measured in quarterly reports. Beckett stood at the kitchen window watching his 7-year-old son, always his son now, teach his younger sister how to kick a soccer ball. Lily Hart Langston was 18 months old, with Callie's green eyes and auburn curls, and Eli's infinite capacity for joy. She toddled after the ball with determined concentration while Eli provided running commentary. Good try, Lily. Remember, use the inside of your foot. Dad taught me that. Dad taught me that. Even after 2 years, those words could still stop Beckett's world. You're going to be late for your interview. Callie's voice came from behind him, warm with amusement. He turned to find her leaning against the doorframe, laptop balanced on her hip, looking every inch the successful journalist she'd become. Her latest expose on corporate data breaches had been picked up by 3 major publications, and there was talk of a book deal. Success looked good on her, confident, glowing, settled in a way that had taken months to fully emerge. I'm not nervous, he lied. You're terrified, she corrected, moving to stand beside him at the window. Which is normal. Starting your own company is scary, even when you have all the experience and contacts in the world. Beckett Hart Cybersecurity had been his dream for over a year now, smaller than his old empire, more focused, built on principles he'd learned from loving people more than profit margins. His first client was a children's hospital. His second was a domestic violence shelter. His business plan would have horrified his former board of directors, and that felt exactly right. What if I fail? He asked, the question that had been keeping him awake at nights. Then you'll figure something else out. We'll figure something else out. She slipped her hand into his, their wedding rings catching the morning light. They'd gotten married 8 months ago in Nora Hart's backyard, with Eli as the ring bearer and Lily as the world's youngest flower girl. No photographers, no contracts, no prenups, just promises made in front of the people who mattered most. Besides, you won't fail. You're too stubborn, and your family is too proud of you to let you give up. Through the window, they watched Eli scoop up his sister when she fell, brushing grass off her tiny jeans with the gentle efficiency of someone who'd learned early that taking care of people was the most important job in the world. Daddy, Mama, Lily's voice carried across the yard, clear and demanding. Up, up. Eli looked toward the house and waved. Dad, come play with us. Lily wants to show you her new running. Callie squeezed his hand. Go. Your interview isn't for an hour, and your daughter is requesting a command performance. Beckett kissed her temple, breathing in the familiar scent of vanilla coffee and determination that had been home to him for 2 years now. I love you. I love you too. Now go. Before they decide to storm the castle and demand their father by force. Outside, the Oregon afternoon was perfect in the way that only early fall could manage. Crisp but warm, bright but gentle. Lily ran toward him on unsteady legs, her face bright with the kind of pure joy that reminded him daily why nothing he'd built before had ever really mattered. Daddy, see, running. She demonstrated her toddler version of running, which looked more like controlled falling with enthusiasm. I see, you're so fast. He scooped her up, spinning her around until she giggled with delight. Are you teaching your brother how to run? I'm teaching her soccer, Eli corrected with 7-year-old authority. But she's better at hugs than kicking right now. Hugs are more important than soccer anyway, Beckett said, settling onto the grass with both children. Really? Eli looked skeptical. Even more important than winning? Especially more important than winning. They played until the sun started to sink behind the mountains, until Callie called them in for dinner, until the ordinary magic of an ordinary Tuesday had worked its way into the spaces between Beckett's ribs and reminded him again that the best things in life couldn't be bought or built. They could only be lived, day by day, choice by choice, love by love. Later, after baths and bedtime stories and the elaborate ritual of getting 2 children to actually sleep, Beckett found himself back at the kitchen window. But this time, instead of looking out, he was looking in, at the life reflected in the glass, at the man he'd become, at the family he'd been brave enough to choose and keep choosing every single day. His phone buzzed with a text from his lawyer. Interview went great. They're very interested. Congratulations, you're officially a small business owner. But that wasn't the message that mattered most tonight. The one that mattered was from Eli, sent from the tablet in his room. Good luck tomorrow, Dad. I'm proud of you. Love, your son, Eli. P.S. Lily says goo-goo, which means she's proud too. Beckett saved the message, then walked upstairs to check on his sleeping children, a ritual he'd never missed, not once in 2 years. Lily was curled up like a tiny shrimp, her fist curled around the ear of her stuffed bunny. Eli lay sprawled across his bed like a starfish, his covers kicked off, a book about space exploration open on his chest. In the hallway, he found Callie waiting for him, her expression soft with the kind of contentment that comes from watching dreams turn into daily life. How'd the interview really go? She whispered. I think I might actually pull this off. I know you will. They stood together in the hallway of their imperfect, beautiful home, listening to the sounds of their children breathing, to the old house settling around them, to the life they'd built together from the wreckage of their separate fears. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if we'd gotten it right the first time? Callie asked quietly. Beckett considered this, then shook his head. No, because then we wouldn't have Eli exactly as he is. We wouldn't have learned how strong we could be apart, how grateful we could be together. We wouldn't have this messy, complicated, perfectly imperfect life, this life where love learned how to stay. Outside, Portland settled into evening, and inside the house on Maple Street, A family slept peacefully, dreaming dreams that no longer needed to come true because they already had. And in the morning they would wake up and choose each other again, the way families do when they understand that love isn't a feeling you fall into. It's a promise you keep, one ordinary, extraordinary day at a time. What would you have done in Beckett's place? Would you have had the courage to fight for a love you thought you'd lost forever? Your participation in our channel is very important. Please, leave your opinion in the comments. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the story, please subscribe to our channel and leave a comment below letting us know what you thought. Your feedback and support mean a lot to us. Stay tuned for more exciting stories.